Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lessons from Around the Globe. Thank you, first of all, to each and every one of you joining us from different time zones today to learn about the way that businesses and institutions and communities are impacted by the strategic choice to prioritize and champion diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, some of you may have heard of the TED speaker and D&I expert Verna Myers, who famously told us in 2019 that diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is all about being asked to dance. Equity is how much space on the floor that you actually get. And belonging is when you are given the choice of the music as well. We're about to learn how we can bring that party into the communities, institutions, and the organizations that we work with, but not just bring it in, also how we keep it going. Thank you once again to all of you. And for those of you who are just joining in, welcome. We would love to have your questions to our panelists on the fireside chat today, but we do have a few questions and a few house rules that we'd like to ensure everyone takes a look at. So our house rules for today are very simple. If you've got any questions to our panelists, feel free to put them up on the Q&A button that you see. It should appear at the bottom of your screen. And the Q&A button gives you the chance to input any questions that you'd like to ask on the topic to our panelists on the fireside chat. Also, at the same time, a quick reminder to all our participants to ensure that audio clarity is 100%, is at 100%, and we have zero interruptions. Please do remain on mute. To our participants, thank you so much for your understanding and your support in making this webinar a success. So we're about to get started on our fireside chat. We're learning about the business case for diversity, but before that, we have a few trivia questions and a little bit of a poll to get things started. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Lido platform, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction as to how you can use Lido. So the instructions will be coming up on the screen in just a moment. If you've got your phones handy, you can log in from your phone, or else you can use your device that you're using to log in to the session today as well. It's www.slido.com. That's www.slido.com, and use the code 296464. That's 296464. So we're learning about the business case for diversity, and we're going to start off with a few trivia questions. So our trivia questions are multiple choice questions, and what we've done is taken a look at the different research that exists on the case for diversity. And as many of you are aware, diversity can take many aspects, take many forms. And today, for example, we're focusing in and really taking a look at what that means in terms of gender representation in the workforce. So as we have our participants logging into the code, we will get started with question number 1 on our trivia segment. All right, the first question is all about diversity. What is diversity? Is diversity a nice to have? Is it a thing of the past? Is it a responsibility of HR? Or is it necessary for strategic business performance? And we see those answers coming in, and we'll give it a couple more seconds before we reveal the right answer. Thank you. We see 13 responses, I believe, that have come in, and that number is climbing. So let's reveal the correct answer now. Yes. Thank you to all of you who voted for option number, or rather option D. 94% of you agree that diversity is necessary for strategic business performance. And we're actually going to take a look at some of how that works in the different communities that we are all a part of, the different parts of the world that we are all representing today as well. Let's take a look at question number 2 now. Question 2 is all about inclusion. What is inclusion? Is inclusion an excuse to form a club? Is inclusion essential at all designations or role bands for organizational success? Is inclusion a setup by feminists? Is it exactly the same as diversity? Let's give it a couple of seconds to see those answers coming in. So we've got 4 different options up on the screen. This is just to really tweak and move your thinking towards the different aspects of diversity and inclusion as we head into the highlight of today's agenda. Thank you very much for your responses. Let's take a look at the right answer now. And it is option B, which is that inclusion is essential at all designations and role bands for organizational success. We'll be talking to our panelists today about how that translates into the employee life cycle and the work that we do. For now, let's take a quick look at question 3. Question 3. So here is a little bit of collated research. If we look at the percentage of women globally who faced gender discrimination at their jobs, where would you fathom a guess? What percentage do you think will fill that gap? So how many, in terms of percentage, how many women globally have faced gender discrimination at their jobs? And let's take a look at the correct answer. And to reveal the correct answer, it is option B. 42% of women face gender discrimination at their jobs globally. Definitely a number or a percentage of concern. We're talking through some of these concerns through today's discussion as well. And on question 4, as we head into the next one, we've got yet another set of percentages. We're looking at leadership now. What is the percentage of Fortune 500 CEOs who are female? The Fortune 500 CEOs who are female. All right, so we see 2 different options which are kind of close in percentage number, but in fact, as we reveal the correct answer, it is in fact 8%. So just over 8% of Fortune 500 CEOs are female. All right, we move into question number 5, but trivia today. So we're looking at research now that was conducted by both Harvard and Princeton University researchers, and they were taking a look at how applications worked when submitted blind. So in other words, when applications were submitted to jobs without specifying gender. And it was, in fact, take a look at the correct answer in just a second. It was, in fact, the likelihood of a female getting the job, which increased by 25 to 46%. We're moving into question number 6 now on our trivia as we start off today's webinar. So question number 6, this is more recent research. McKinsey releases an annual report on the status or the analytics of women in work. What is the correlation between company profits and share performance and women representation at leadership level? So we see those sliders moving, very interesting one, this one. The percentages seem to be moving, all right. Give it another couple of seconds to see what those numbers are. And yes, let's reveal the right answer. So this is McKinsey's 2021 report. 50% higher when women are well represented at the top. And now, on to the next question, which is question number 7. This is not trivia. This is to find out your input. It's more of a poll. Have you ever been discriminated against based on your gender identity? So I recall being in a session some years ago, several years ago, in fact, when I first heard the term diversity and inclusion. And this was one of the questions that was posed at the time by the facilitator. And so very interesting. We see a 52% on the yes in response to discrimination based on gender identity. And oh wow, we just hit 50-50. So interesting results there, and thank you very much to all of you for sharing that. And we head from there into our eighth question, which is our final question today on the polls. Have you ever witnessed discrimination based on gender identity? Yes, diversity is a topic that's much spoken of. Inclusion is as well, but we've got to talk about the tough stuff as we talk on how we can really champion and prioritize diversity and inclusion in the communities and businesses that we work with. So the numbers speak for themselves. 87% of you have witnessed discrimination based on gender identity. And thank you once again to all of you for your input and for being active participants in this poll. It really helps to hear from you as we move into our next segment, which is the highlight of today's agenda, our fireside chat with our fantastic panelists joining us from around the globe. Our panelists will be speaking to us about lessons on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you, everyone, for being part of the Lido activity that we just had to get your inputs. So I will be taking a few moments now to introduce you to our fantastic panel of speakers on today's webinar. And I'd like to begin by introducing Anwen Robinson. Anwen Robinson is the Senior Vice President and General Manager for Info, UK and Europe. Additionally, Anwen plays the role of Executive Sponsor of the People and Wellbeing Employee Group. We are extremely delighted to have you on our discussion today, Anwen, and thank you for joining. Our panel also includes Iram Malik. Now, Iram leads Partner Infrastructure for Arcadis UK and chairs the organization's Gender Affinity Group globally. Iram's experience over 25 years varies from both economics to journalism and consulting. Thank you, Iram, for your time today on the discussion. Allow me now to introduce you to Lauren Rollefson. Lauren manages the Global Inclusion, Community Change and Communications arm at Info, and Lauren's expertise is in the design and execution of diversity and inclusion initiatives. Excited to hear more from you today, Lauren, and thank you very much for being part of our discussion. Our next panelist is Anna Taroglu. She is a digital transformation consultant based out of Zurich, Switzerland. Anna's experience is in return on investment via identifying opportunities for change. Thank you, Anna, for being part of the fireside chat, which we're just about to get started on. Our panelist today that I'm going to introduce next is James Abdul. James is Fortude Senior Vice President, UK and Europe. And James leads the organization's growth in the region while also chairing the Crawley Open House charity for social inclusion. Thank you, James, for your time today on the panel. And just before we head into our questions to our panel today, I'm Kavita, and I will be your moderator for the fireside chat. We'll be hoping to hear from you on your questions. This is to all of our participants joining in. Just by way of introduction, I lead the talent development function for Fortude, and also delighted to have been part of the diversity and inclusion strategy over the last 3 years for Fortude as well. Certainly excited to hear from all of our panelists as we move into our panel chat today. Now, in our brief introduction, shared a few moments ago, we saw cross-cutting themes, and we heard words like change, employee culture, gender affinity, diversity, inclusion, strategy. Just a reminder to all of you just joining us in, diversity has multiple aspects. We've got age, we've got ethnic background, we've got sexual orientation, we've got physical and sensory abilities. The list continues. But today we're focusing on the gender aspect of diversity in particular. And so my first question will be to our entire panel, in fact. Opening it out to the whole panel, my first question, could you tell us how you would rate the success of diversity and inclusion in your respective organizations or communities. So let's imagine a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. Tell us a little bit about the rate of success of diversity and inclusion in the communities and organizations that you're a part of. Could I invite Anna to start us off, please?
Sure, thank you. So I would rate around 6, I would say, because there are numerous programs like promoting diversity and inclusion in the consulting and financial services industry in particular. And I can see that there's significant investment from the companies and like during the past years, and also the leaders and managers are more keen and more empathetic to understand like the unique strengths that people and specifically women bring to the table in order to promote like more diverse views that can retain more talent and also enhance the performance in the workplace.
Thank you, Anna. Lauren, could you tell us about where you would rate it? So Lauren, I believe that we can see you very clearly, but we couldn't hear you just then. Would you mind taking us through that again?
Of course. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Clearly.
Thank you. So I'm hoping that Anwen is going to agree with me here when I put the number down, but I'm also going to give it a 6 actually. And the reason is because I think we have pockets of success in Infor. We have a number of business resource groups, employee networks, which are really doing a lot and creating a great sense of belonging. And we have a lot of programs which are really making progress. And we also have 33% of women in the organisation. So for tech industry, that's not bad. However, with a company of 17,000 employees, we definitely have opportunity to get more of our employee population involved.
Understood. Thank you for sharing that, Lauren. Anwen. No problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Excellent. So I'm hoping my voice will hold out in actual fact. I've had laryngitis all week, so it's pretty good at the moment. I'm pleased that you actually asked Lauren to speak first. I actually joined Infor in March of this year, and I must admit I've been quite impressed by how we are actually supporting diversity and inclusion across the whole of the organisation. I'm responsible for the UK and Ireland, so I'm going to take a little bit of a parochial view in that regard, and I think we're doing a lot of good things here. But I think the key thing to underpin, and this is what I was really impressed in, and I think we're probably more of a 7 approaching 8, Lauren, so I think you're underestimating it, because of all of the activities we're actually doing to promote this. And it's underpinned by our parent company is Koch Industries. So we are the largest sort of privately owned organization, software organization globally in actual fact. But the underlying principles that the company abides by were sort of set in stones by Charles Koch. With his market-based management, and diversity and inclusion absolutely underpins this, and it gives us our North Star in terms of how we should conduct ourselves across all aspects of our business, and it does allow us sort of aspects where we should check. So there, I'd agree with Lauren, we still got a way to go, and I'll certainly be talking about some of the few things that we put in place to checks and balances along the way. But I've actually been pretty impressed with where Infor are on this journey.
Thank you for that, Anwen. Iram, your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it's all about what's actually been achieved so far. So, and I'd answer it differently. I work in the construction industry, and I'd answer it differently for the construction industry and for Arcadis. I think it's an industry overall, we're probably at about 4. Conversations have started, but you just have to look at the profile of our industry to know that there's a lot of room for improvement still. At Arcadis, however, we started the conversation much earlier than most. So globally, we're 37% women, which is a really high statistic for us, a company that basically works in construction and engineering. And we've been having all the conversations around how we make further improvements. And so I'd say we're at a 7, and we're on a journey of real improvement, even down to the fact our global leadership team is 50-50 male and female.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. James, your thoughts, please.
I can see you clearly left the only male to last, but that's fine. I understand my position in this whole discussion. The fact that I'm often described by the women in our household and people I meet as being stuck in a time warp is kind of apt that I join you from a TARDIS. I think I would, being the man I am, I think I would say that Fortude is a 10, but I think I will get shot down on that. But joking aside, I would say that we're a good 6.5. And like Anwin and others, when we look at women in tech, I think Fortude is driving an agenda to get higher up that ranking, and we're fortunate that our boss is very open to this and has it on his agenda. So I think we're lucky to have that. And in the 2.5 years that I've been at Fortude, I can clearly see how that is progressing. Are we done yet? No, there's lots more to do. But I am pleased by what I see. And it's definitely room for improvement.
Thank you, James. So we've heard terms like pockets of success and further ways to go, and we're clearly all on a journey here. So I'm going to once again open it out to the entire panel. This time I'm not going to roll call, but it's been called different things. It's sometimes referred to as the glass ceiling. Recently, actually, in a conversation, I heard the term the brick wall. So the question to our panelists is, in enabling gender representation, what barriers have you observed and have you witnessed? And this would be at any level or at any stage of an employee's life in the workforce. Could you tell us about what you witnessed and observed?
Can I go first, just to make a clarification around the difference between a glass ceiling and a brick wall?
Yes, please. It is a learning session after all. Yes, please.
Yeah. So women generally face a glass ceiling, but you can see through a glass ceiling. You can see what the opportunity might be above you. The term brick wall specifically refers to women of colour who are minorities in the country they operate. And for that, with a brick wall, you can't even see where your next step is. And it describes the additional barriers that occur for women of colour on top of the ones that occur for women more generally. And so it's looking at how can you address those additional barriers as ones as the women face. But just to go on to talk about some of what those barriers are for all women generally, really there's a lack of sponsorship. So progression in careers happens a lot through the fact you find a great sponsor who's willing to put their name against how great you are, and that happens less for women. It tends to be much more of a focus on the evidence of what you've done, as opposed to with men, where they're looking much more at the potential of what you've done. There's also the generic biases that come from people thinking everyone who's great must look a lot like me. When you have a lot of men in senior leadership positions, that means they can potentially overlook the women. It's also about not valuing the additional and different types of skills women might bring to a team dynamic. There's a different language that's used for women. So men are assertive, women are aggressive, is the example that's always given. So that's a very different language. And then coming back to the point around women of colour, there's an onus on, if you are a woman of colour in a senior position, there's a huge onus on you to be the one who makes the change. But that oneness of being the only one can make it very difficult for you to make the change, because it means you're the sole voice and you're meant to be representing the views of hundreds and thousands of people in that one sole voice. And that can be a real barrier to progression as well.
I 100% agree with absolutely everything you've said there. 100% agree. And I think it is key in terms of finding the right sponsors and that mentorship. And I think we as females can do a lot more to do that, to promote that as well. In terms of my background, I'm from engineering and construction as well, but I've had quite a diverse career path that I've actually followed. And but I think these ceilings, walls actually start very, very early on for females. I think it starts actually in the family. It starts in schools, where frequently girls don't have a voice or feel that they can't speak up. And the biggest thing I've seen is that they have to sometimes overcome the voice in the head that says, I'm not quite good enough, or I shouldn't put my hand up to be counted. So again, having people that from a role model perspective that they can see, and having those people stand up to say, I'm prepared to actually sponsor, mentor, make sure you have a voice is absolutely vital in terms of changing this whole agenda.
I would like to add to that, actually. We, Infor sponsored the UK Black Business Week last week. We were one of the corporate sponsors there, and actually we sponsored the panel on navigating the tech diversity gap, so looking at diversity in the tech industry. And we were fortunate enough to attend a session with Sir Trevor McDonald, and he actually said, he asked the question to the audience, were you raised to believe you would be successful? Now, he was fortunate enough to say he was, because he had a father who believed in him. And it's interesting because I often get asked this myself, and as Anwin said, personally, I was raised in a family with two brothers, and whilst I was really encouraged to go to university and do well, there was definitely an unspoken sort of gender discrimination. They were definitely supposed to do better than me. And so I would like to sort of, there are so many aspects to this question and to this answer, but I think following from what Iram said, sponsorship really is key. And I would really urge people to take time to understand the difference between sponsoring people and mentoring people. So mentoring in terms of coaching and supporting people. Sponsoring is about coaching and supporting, but not then forgetting them. It's about owning their success and really following their success and taking personal responsibility for that person's success. And I think there are not enough people that do that in the workplace, but I'm definitely seeing it happening more and more. So there's a lot of research on this, so please do go out and look more at sponsorship.
And maybe one thing to add from my side is just, the theoretical perspective and also the practical perspective. So in theory, of course, you have all these trainings and, the coaching, etc. But then how you make a concrete action plan in order to embed it into the workplace, into the organization is key. So having a genuine platform to express opinions, speak up, and also challenge things.
Thank you so much for all those views, and certainly some interesting terms there that were also used, and for those clarifications and all that learning. Definitely the angle of sponsorship and ownership, and the angle of mentorship as well, or mentoring as well, that came in, but also at the same time, how do you create the opportunity for dialogue and for the conversations, or to raise questions on the same. So on the topic of sponsoring and ownership, and how that differs from mentoring, Iram, perhaps if you could tell us a bit more about how diversity needs to be established across all stages of an employee's career. You mentioned a few key areas as well, the evidence component, and how the differentiator between the glass ceiling and the brick wall. Your thoughts, please, on how this works at different stages of an employee's career.
Yeah, so I've worked in construction for over 25 years now. And I remember when I first started off as a graduate, people would say to me, there aren't any women in leadership because there aren't enough women doing engineering courses. And, over time, as more women do engineering, we'll get more women leaders. And we're now at a point where it's still not 100% balanced, but, we're getting to the point of 50-50 in terms of women coming in and joining at the most junior levels. And that's been going on for a while. So you start to question, so middle management, we should have 50-50 at least, even if we haven't got it at senior management. Yet the rates at which women leave the industry is staggeringly high. And so we start off with 50-50, and by the time we get into leadership positions, we're down to about 20%. So if you only focus on recruitment at the junior levels, we're never going to make a difference to what our industry looks like. So for me, it's, you know, I know the question is about diversity, but for me, it's really about inclusion, because inclusion will create diversity. Diversity won't create inclusion. And so it's really, how do you create a more inclusive environment for your people? And that is looking at sponsorship, absolutely. And I thought Lauren's definition of sponsorship versus mentorship is excellent, exactly what people need to think about. But also you need to look at, how are you undertaking promotions in your business? What are the criteria you're using for promotions? Who's making those decisions? Yep. How are you making sure that you've got a balance in terms of salaries? How do you make sure your job descriptions at every level don't have a male bias in them? So how are you gender decoding those job descriptions that you write? Also, how are you implementing flexible working policies that work for everyone? How do you support returners to work? And then you can look at the bit about what additional support do women of colour potentially need. But it's about asking the right questions, because it'll be different in every organisation, different in every industry. So ask the people what it is that's stopping them progressing, and then build your plan. And those are just some suggestions. And I think certainly from our perspective, we mustn't forget clients in the whole conversation, because clients are absolutely critical to how we get women to progress in our organisation. And we need to change the industry overall. So whatever we're doing as organisations, we need to help our clients do the same thing and mirror those activities, provide those opportunities. And I guess a key point for me in all of this, if you create a working environment that's more inclusive and better for women, it's also a working environment that's more inclusive and better for everyone. So everyone benefits from it.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just going to say, following on from that, that's actually an area that we're at Info are actively looking at the moment. In terms of, are we ensuring in our recruitment process that we haven't got sort of unconscious biases that are actually built into that recruitment process? So we're actually reviewing everything down to sort of the job descriptions. Where do we actually go to find the talent that we're actually looking for? Are we unconsciously going to the wrong places, or looking for the wrong types of skill sets that are going to support us in terms of our growth, where we are, you know, in terms of our own journey? Info, even though we're an extremely large global organization, we've got huge aspirations to take it to the next level, and we want to do that with the right balance of the skills, the right culture, the right behaviors, right across the whole organization. So we are questioning all parts of that at the moment. And I'm part of a group that's actively looking at sort of inclusion and diversity actually within the recruitment process itself. So it's quite interesting.
Thank you for that, Irma and Anwen. And certainly those, I was making notes myself. You would have seen me, you know, looking to my right and, you know, scribbling things down, because it is a learning session after all. And I think something that you mentioned, Irma, at the start was ask the questions. Each industry differs and each organization differs, and that really is key. And thank you, Anwen, for talking to us also on the unconscious bias component in the recruitment segment. So I'm going to kind of lead from the unconscious bias statement there. And this is a question to Anna. I'm going to start off by asking the question to Anna, and feel free to comment, please, panelists. We've spoken of gender diversity, but how critical is it to have the support of all genders on the diversity agenda? And I'll give you an example. He for she, for example, is something that's a campaign that's taken on by certain organizations, or it's sometimes called the male ally. Perhaps, Anna, if you could start us off.
Sure. So first of all, I regularly see like more male leaders feel more defensive on this diversity and inclusion journey. So the D&I like practitioners need to offer more psychologically safe spaces for all people to explore these conversations. Otherwise, we will continue like to encounter the defensiveness and won't get the support we seek from them. So answering your question is very critical indeed to have the support of men, as the diversity agenda helps like the whole workplace. And it's very key, like, to share opportunities amongst all employees, as well as create a collective kind of intelligence, because this will help like the companies to have a better gender balance in order to create a greater level of innovation, also design like better products for the customers or the clients, and also increase the staff like motivation and engagement. And as an example, when I was working for a big financial services client that were particularly looking on the data analytics space, I have observed like a senior manager, like a male senior manager, who was supporting the women in tech and also spending a lot of time with his team members, because he wanted to understand more like any challenges or improvements he could do in order to improve the day that they worked all together and also become more innovative. So he wanted to become like the role model and set the tone in this organization. And that was before COVID time, but then he wanted to promote like the flexible working, also provide a platform for an open dialogue and also support like the personal career objectives. So the overall result of that kind of approach was that the satisfaction of his team, as well as the financial results that he brought on the table, made other male managers to embrace this approach and also become more open to get involved in this diversity agenda. So overall, yes, it's very key and important indeed to include male allies.
Thank you, Anna. James, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I try and get people to understand and is that I don't really care what you thought or thought you knew last year or the year before or in the past. Just make sure that you try and unlearn that, so that going forward you're open and more you've got a wider outlook on actually what the world looks like through the lens today, because there are too many dare I say it biased views and viewpoints and sort of like old habits that, dare I say, a lot of people in management, in particular men in management positions, they still hold on to those stigmas. And I'm afraid that, especially during COVID times, you've learned to realize that people can work wherever they want, however they want. I don't care if you're dressed in your PJs all day, if I'm honest. You know, if your output's there, I don't really care. If that means that you're dealing with family or whatever else in between, no big deal. So, you know, not a lot of people maybe had that opinion pre-COVID, but I do hope that a lot of people have realized during that time, men in particular, that they need to unlearn those really bad habits and be more open to, you know, what is the art of the possible going forward in terms of being more inclusive and more diverse and equal.
Can I add something there, Kavitha?
Of course, yes, please.
I just think that's a great point you made there, James, because, you know, this work is also about the individual. It's about understanding people's individuals. And you've just said, you know, we all look at change in the workplace and change in the industries, but this is changing ourselves and our mindsets. And so the point that you make that we as people change and can change as well is so important. That idea of not having a fixed mindset, but having a growth mindset and thinking, just being curious and thinking, maybe my view on this is slightly wrong. Maybe I could think a different way. Maybe I could seek to understand people better and understand situations better. And I'd just love to draw quickly on an example I had from a call I was on last week, where we had the co-chair of our Pride at Infor business resource group speaking in one of his sessions. And we got into a discussion, he got into a discussion with some women on the call, and it came to the discussion about menopause. And it was something he had never considered before, he'd never really learned about, and he was really asking the questions. And he was really seeking to understand. And other people on the call sort of made comments afterwards about what a great role model he was, because this is, you may have heard of the word intersectionality. This is where Pride at Infor crosses over with women at Infor and all these discussions. And in terms of women being carers for other people or women having to care for themselves, he was genuinely interested. So having that role model and seeing him change himself and his own learning was really great to see. Thank you.
Well said, Ron. Well said.
Can I just say one thing that happened to me? I I don't know why I laughed then. It happened to me at an interview in 2003 for a board position, a senior board position. It still makes me laugh now that the chair of this national industry said to me, said, "It would be great to have you on board because you'll tick that box." And it's not often, I hope my son isn't listening, it's not often that I want to stand up, reach out and punch somebody. But I did get the job and I did tick that box. And I was also given the diversity and inclusion lead role for this non-exec position. But I will never forget that. And the worst thing about it was when I went for another board position, he was also on the board there. And I just walked in and I thought, I can't do this again, but I did. But yeah, I've never forgotten that, and it's at least I ticked a box.
All right, so thank you so much for those insights there. We're going to move into our fifth question, actually, and it's to Anwen. My question is: you spoke on recruitment and unconscious bias in your comments before. And some actions that Info is taking. Could you share with us, and when a little bit more on those actions, particularly on the gender diversity angle that you've seen yielding results?
No, absolutely, and I think Lauren articulated it very, very well. So I joined relatively recently into Info, so every day is a learning day as far as I'm concerned, and I'm delighted on a daily basis as well. But these business resource groups are already, a number of these are already well established across Info globally, such as the sort of women at Info support group and the Black at Info, etc. The one that was recently founded is the one that I'm the executive sponsor for, is the People and Wellbeing. And this is about promoting, again, not just physical well-being, but mental well-being. And this is something I'm very passionate about as well, that we should be able to talk about mental wellness across the organization, and in particular get men to talk out about this as well. I think females will share things, but males sometimes keep it in. So there's sometimes a little bit of bias in that regard as well. So, but this is what I've loved about Info, is that Info gives employees a voice, all right? And these are groups that are run by employees that are wholly supported by the executives from the top down. And this is a great thing to see. And we now are actually bringing the collaboration across the groups, as Lauren has actually said, because there is so much that we can gain by collaborating and taking it forward. Some of the other aspects that we've been involved in, and it's about the actions, it's about doing, not just talking about it. It's the key thing. It's a little bit like sustainability that is the key theme at the moment. Everybody's got a voice on sustainability, but if we don't actually get out there and do something, then nobody's going to gain anything from it. And diversity and inclusion is exactly that. Everybody has to have a voice on it, but unless you're actively out there and doing something, then it'll just perpetuate. And it comes from the top down. It absolutely permeates the organization from the top down, and you've got to get the culture right. You've got to get give the people an opportunity to have that voice in a safe environment to be able to raise these things. And that's what I've been thrilled to see at Info, that increasingly this voice is there. And it's also by actively supporting in the community the events such as Lauren mentioned, and she was superb, as well as some of the other Inforians in terms of supporting Black Business Week. But we're also now, from a UK point of view, active supporters of the Prince's Trust, and the trust are very, very active in terms of supporting diversity inclusion, and also ensuring that disadvantaged youth have a way forward. So we are trying to do things by showing we're not just talking about it, we are actively supporting right across the organisation.
Thank you for that, Anwen. Thank you. So when we, I'm going to head into the penultimate question actually on my list today before we open the the Q&A that we've asked our participants to share questions on. We had James and Lauren telling us earlier on about the changes that COVID has brought and the growth mindset that you beautifully articulated as well, Lauren. It's a VUCA world and it's been for some time. What are your thoughts on championing the gender diversity space in the hybrid workplace?
Lauren, would you like to go first?
If you're happy for me to, James, I've got so much to say on this. So thank you, Kavitha. I think for those people who may not be aware of this, I'm sure they are, but let's just break down the acronym. So VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I know we've talked a lot about change, and Hannah, you're focused on this, on change management. It's part of my role as well. And I think I alluded to this earlier. So for me and for what I've seen, it's really about going down to the individual, building the relationships with people, managers and leaders, building those relationships. In Infor, we have very sort of tight advice and guidance from, as Anwin said earlier, from our parent company, Coke, on the responsibilities of a leader. And there really is a lot of focus on relationship building and on managers regularly checking in with their employees. So in this hybrid world, it's not just about asking women what they would like. Would they like to go back to the office? Would they not like to go back to the office? What types of flexibility would they like? It's not just about asking once, it's about regularly asking, because things are always changing. Things may change for them in their personal circumstances. And if that relationship can stay open, the woman is more likely to stay and to be retained in that company and to be happy and performing in their job. So I think asking the question, what do you need this week? How can I help you this week or today? Or how are things going today? Rather than just how are things going? By asking that question, it emphasizes that the person has understood that change is ongoing. And I think having the manager role model and have that empathy, and for me, it also in terms of representation. I mean, I've only worked in one other organisation where there's been a general manager who's been a woman. So for me, having Anwin as that role model, general manager of the UK and Ireland at Infor, and seeing how she manages people and her empathy and how she works with people, and how supportive she is also with the Wellbeing group here at Infor, it gives me that aspiration. It lets me see how this is really working in practice. And as Anwin said, we're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it. And me as a woman, I'm actually seeing it. So it's really great to see that.
Cool.
My heart, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren. I think when I started to learn about volatility, complexity, uncertainty, I kind of thought, God, it's reminding me of the mood I'm going to find my wife in when I tell her that I've scratched their car again. And it takes me back to the saying of, behind every great man, there's a great woman. But that's not the case with me. She's nowhere near behind me. She's way ahead. And she's the more important person at home. But at work, for me, what has been great in this is our sensitivity around cultures, and the how we've embraced that. And our two things that I'd say that our boss has really given us is, understanding that family is first. It doesn't matter what happens, your family is first. And during these times, it's understanding that, people are caring for others at the same time as having to work, whether that's parents, whether that's kids. And, I've been fortunate to be able to say to somebody, look, you need to go and look after your family first. And, if that means 6 months, a year, 18 months, we'll survive, but you're not going to get that time back. And so that was really important. And knowing that, we can encourage people to do what's unknown at the moment, because we don't know what's around the corner at times. And that's not just me, going out there and cooking a meal for my wife one evening, which apparently is now the regular thing. It's more, and it's encouraging my team members and people that are part of the wider Fortude to go and do some of that. But the second thing that has been really good for me at Fortude, and Anwen, I'm so glad that we have joined this. Joking aside, I've learned a couple of things about you where we resonate. The mental health for me is a huge thing. I was fortunate enough earlier this year to retrain as a mental health first aider. And again, our boss has said, go on, champion it throughout the business. I don't have to ask him for anything. It's just a blank sheet of paper to go and do what is necessary for the well-being, the mental well-being of all our people. And that it's been awesome. And actually, I joke about her. My wife heard about it. She also did the course as well. And although she doesn't have a working job per se, she has the tougher job managing the family. But for her, having that insight into the mental health and mental well-being is really key when she's dealing with whatever she's dealing. Not just me, but everything else that goes on. And I think, honestly, a life lesson for anybody, any parent, but anybody in particular, should be more awareness and understanding of mental well-being. So, I take my hat off to our boss and all those bosses out there that allow people to go forth and really gem up on mental health and drive that agenda forward.
It's okay not to be okay. I think it's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Can I just make one comment as well in terms of the survey, which I think shouldn't be underestimated, was those companies that had that diverse board were, far more successful in that regard. Yeah. Don't underestimate that point either. I think having a board that is able to actually drive a strategy, but view it from from different angles, with different skill sets, and being able to do it in a collaborative way. And sometimes, there are female skills that can be brought to the fore that give that balance on a board. And I've worked for organizations that have evolved from very male-dominated to actually having the balance. I'm not a great fan of quotas at all, right? I think people should have the opportunity to break down the walls and break the glass ceilings and everything else, and be promoted to the levels, and supported to the levels that they can be. But when you see that coming together, and when you see that, everybody playing to their strengths and collaborating, drawn upon that, that's when exciting things then start to happen.
Thank you for that, Anwen. And Iram, any comments there too?
I guess it's just building on Anwen's point about the quotas. Quotas can have some really negative implications. Yeah. As soon as you say, we want this percentage women, you turn off all the men who think they now no longer have opportunities. And we need to be careful of that. And what we're really saying is, we still want the best person for the job. Right? So our global leadership team is 50-50. And it's not because we said we have to have 50% women. It's a lovely consequence of the fact that we looked at what we meant by best person for the job, and we made sure we had an all-encompassing set of criteria for that. And so for me, it's absolutely, in this VUCA world, we've proven we don't have to do things the way we already did things. We can do things differently, exactly like James said. And so why now go backwards? Let's take where we've got to. And COVID has been a terrible disease, but it has given us some advantages in understanding the workplace better. So just let's use that and move forward with that whole thing around flexible working and understanding the best person for the role.
I actually did consider, I got a t-shirt that actually says, underestimate me, that will be fun. And I think every female should actually have one of those, because it's great for the spirit.
Absolutely. So we're on to our final few minutes, in fact, of our webinar today. I've just taken a look at some of the questions as well, and one of the questions actually from the Q&A ties in with the final question that I've got. So I'm going to weave it together. We've spoken on the different aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've spoken about the different levels of accountability that we all have within the organizations and communities that we're a part of. And we'd love to hear from all of you before we close. We've had some fantastic actions. Tell us a little bit about perhaps one best practice that you'd like to leave our audience with today. It could be in terms of enabling or encouraging diversity and inclusion. It could be within your communities, it could be within your teams, it could be within your organization. So I'm going to open it out and perhaps invite Iram to start us off.
So going back to the point Anne made, so employee resource groups, they are really important, right? Because they are on the ground creating tangible action. And as Lauren said earlier, it comes from the top, right? So you have to have employee resource groups, but you have to have them coming from the top. But for me, the key action is you can't solve a problem until people realize there is a problem. And I think in many industries, if you are a straight white man, you will not recognize there is a problem with diversity and inclusion. And therefore you have to start with an educational piece. And Arcadis did that in a brilliant way. They did it through a set of inclusion scenarios, and they put these videos out there. And I ran some of these groups, and we started off with groups of 10 people all saying, I don't know why we're talking about this. There's no issue with diversity and inclusion in Arcadis. We played these videos of real life scenarios and had the conversation. And by the end of it, honestly, these people had their heads in their hands saying, we need to do something. This cannot be how we're operating. We need to make a change. And that was the foundation for everything else that we've done, because it made such a big cultural change in making people sure people understood what the issues were.
Thank you for that, Iram. Perhaps Anna?
For me, the key part is to celebrate the employee differences. So no company wants to attract the similar talent. So developing a competitive advantage for an organization, you want to have the different people, different cultures, etc., to have different skills and also bring in ideas and different success stories. So yeah, celebrate employee differences. That's key for me.
Thank you. Lauren?
Yes, Kavita, very quickly. I think for me, it's about using technology to help this. So there are collaboration tools out there. You know, we sell and design software for enterprises, but use your HR software to survey people, to do manager check-ins, to ask people how they're doing. And so things like collaboration tools, using something like Yammer to build communities and get people to share their stories, and using Yammer in business resource groups, things like that. Those tools can also really help bring people together and get voices heard in the organizations.
Thank you, Lauren. James?
Oh, I was prepared to be going last again as the only man. I think for me, it's just going back on the mental well-being piece. You know, I grew up understand that, you know, the first sign of madness was talking to yourself, but I think it's really important to teach people to talk to themselves and understand how important that is. And by that I mean, you know, questioning yourself about, yeah, am I okay? You know, what are the 3 things or 4 things that I know mean that I'm not doing okay, and I know what mine are. And when I don't have that correct work-life balance, I might snap. When I do snap, I know, okay, something is wrong. And there's certain things that I check off about myself, but it's teaching others to do that and being able to then teach their own teams about that, so that you can spot it in others as well. And it doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, anything, but having that ability to talk to yourself and then teach others and then spot it in others, I think is hugely powerful.
Thank you, James. Anwin?
I was just going to say, I think there's another webinar coming on there, James, that I would very happily support you on that topic. Can I actually, I echo everything that's just been said beforehand, but I actually made a little note of something that, if you allow me, I'd like to read out. Because again, I think it comes from the top, and this is why I'm so proud to belong and to work for Info. So we've actually got a vice president of inclusion, community, and HR. All right, so having somebody right at the top, and this is a lady, and she's a black lady, right? So that's in this particular role. And not because she ticks the box, James, but because she's the right person to do in this role. And she quoted something recently. It's actually out there, but I mentioned before that we follow the Charles Koch's guidelines in terms of how we should be developing and growing our business. And she actually said, by respecting our diversity, we leverage the best knowledge that is amongst us to improve performance, because this is all about from a business point of view. And as we continue on this journey, we're going to act with proper regard to the rights of others and act with integrity, honesty, dignity, respect, and sensitivity. And in doing so, we become self-actualized. And I think having people at the top that believe in this, and then make sure that, you know, it's underpins everything we do in our daily and in our business. It's just a fantastic sort of spirit to be part of.
Absolutely, Anwen. And I think, I mean, the final few words there that you just mentioned: integrity, honesty, respect, and sensitivity. I think those 4 words together, it really does resonate with what we've been talking about for the last 45 to 50 minutes, in fact. And bringing us actually to a wonderful place as we close up our fireside chat for today. But before we go, I would be failing in my duties if I didn't extend a word of thanks to all of our panelists today. I've been asking you questions, and we've been in touch over the last week or so, but I've learned so much in the run-up on the preparation for this session, and definitely today, just listening to all of you, definitely things that I'm sure our participants, our audience today, can also take back and ensure that they are put into practice. But at the same time, that whole aspect of mindset change and how that affects culture as we move towards the more diverse and inclusive workplaces and communities in every place around the globe. So thank you so much to Iram, to Lauren, to James, to Anna, and to Anwen. I know, Anwen, you've made it through a tough week on The Voice, and really appreciate the fact that you're here with us today. Actually, to all of you for your time and for all the wonderful work that you've done in this space of diversity, particularly bringing together your ideas and sharing with us. To quote what Lauren and James did mention earlier, the whole angle of growing also ties in with learning. And that's part of the reason why we asked for your support on this session on lessons from around the globe. Thank you also to our audience today. You've been a fantastic audience with some fantastic engagement right from the start on our trivia segment as well. Before we go and before we sign out for today's session, a quick thank you and also a quick reminder to everyone who is logged in. Don't forget to follow us, Fortude, on our social media channels and handles. You see the different handles and channels coming up. That's on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you to our panelists joining us from different time zones and different regions across the world. And we really are looking forward to engaging with each and every one of you as we move together on this journey. Don't forget that this was part of our global webinar series. This is just the second on our sessions of the global webinar series, and we will be bringing to you very much more on the same. In the meantime, as we prepare for the next session, which will be coming to you very, very soon, thank you to all of you. We look forward to hearing from all of you participants as well, and also to, of course, our team behind the scenes. We've got our event partners, popcorn teams, who've been supporting us on this event, and of course the lovely team here at Fortude who've been working on this program throughout the session. And of course, right now, there's a lot that's been going on as well to make this a successful webinar. My thanks to all of you. Thank you for all the learning, and we look forward to hearing from you as you put those learnings into practice. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.